Loretta, we're going to talk leadership stuff now. We're going over to, as I said, or up to Queensland, as they say. Anton Guinea, he's in Brisbane. He's probably got 23 degrees already. Anton, good morning and welcome to the Pulse.
Good morning, Robert Cameron and Loretta. How are we both this morning? Yes, it is great in Queensland, as it always is, and though it's always great for me to speak to your fantastic listeners.
Hey, yeah, we enjoy your chats. We've been probably going at this at over 12 months now, and we've had some very interesting conversations around leadership, workplace, health and safety. Health and safety is where we started, and at the moment, I would imagine in your field, for a slightly different reason, and down here we're certainly having the stress of COVID-related workplace absenteeism, which of course then puts extra stress on others when staff is short and job needs to be done. It's a new look workplace, Anton, and probably not necessarily a great one.
Oh, Robert, I've got to tell you, every day, like literally every day of my working life at the moment, I hear the word resources, and even not even working days. So yesterday was about probably 5:30 a.m., would you believe, and I was running it, as you do. I know everyone does that on a Sunday morning at 5 or 4 o'clock in the morning, doing a lazy 20k run, and the person that I was running with was an emergency department nurse, right? And so his name's Daniel, actually, which is a bit of a unique name. And
like Anton.
So, I know. Daniel and Ann. Nearly rhymes. And so we're running along, and I said, oh, how's life? Yeah, good. He said, oh, I'm really worried about today. I said, why is that? He said, because I start at 7, and it was a Sunday. And he said, look, Sunday's not too bad usually. Lucky it's not a Friday or a Saturday night because we are short-staffed. I said, wow. And he said, resourcing is really hard. Imagine in emergency, right? Like this is care that we need, you and I and our fellow society members, when something goes horribly wrong for us, and hopefully it never does, though for someone near us, or us or a loved one, it might. And if, things like the emergency department is well-staffed and you've got nurses that are worried about that, like that's, it's scary to think about, really, isn't it? When you go out into the community, you think, what businesses, what organisations, what care facilities are really, really struggling for resources? Because if they don't have those resources, they just can't serve their community. They can't serve their clients even.
Yeah, and you've done most of your work on building sites. So, well, not building site, while there's maybe a cost factor comes in, the point is it can be done tomorrow if we can't do it today. But when you're in an aged care facility, childcare facility, hospital, particularly an emergency department, and you're understaffed, stress comes from a lot. It comes from the patients. It comes from the patient's friends and family. It comes from fellow workers, because in those three fields that I've spoken about, generally the people in there are beautiful, soft, warm, compassionate, empathetic people that don't want to see the job cut short. They don't want to see children not cared for, or elderly people in those care facilities. So, of course, the stress then builds up internally.
Absolutely. And those jobs are passion jobs, we call them. Do them because they care. And when you can't do your job with care because you don't have the resources to do that, absolutely that shows up internally. And what we talk about stress and duress, Robert. So we talk about stress being internal, so the pressure that we put on ourselves to do a great job. But then just imagine, let's just amplify this just for a second for your viewers and just for your listeners, and just say, hey, what if there's duress? So what that means is external stress. So that means a leader putting some stress on someone to do something that they just stretched, or they, to be in two places at once. So we need you here, we need you there. And all of a sudden, we've got this internal stress to do a good job, but we've also got this external duress to be in two places at once, or to be, multitasking, multi-skilling. And that in itself, the combination of stress and duress is obviously pressure. It just leads to poor decision-making. It leads to short-term anxiety, long-term other psychological challenges. And we all know that psychological safety is such a big thing at the moment. Like we've probably gone through, you and I have gone through physical safety, and we sort of touched on psychological safety and some of the resilience conversations that we've had. But at the end of the day, what it's really incumbent upon leaders at the moment is to understand that there's a whole range of stress on humans because they're trying to do such a great job. They're feeling pressured sometimes by their leaders, and it's about how do we actually, as leaders, as communities, as society, take a step back and just say, you know what, we need to help people that are at, let's say, let's just pick the front line at emergency care, and just say, how do we actually support them? How do we help them feel safe, not feel stressed, not feel under duress, not feel like they have to multitask, and that they are supported? Yeah, so from a psych safety perspective, let's care for our humans, let's care for our workers, and let's do that from a leadership perspective and in a way that is actually human.
Yeah, and there's all those different tiers of leadership, Anton, and often it's the ones in the middle, the foreman in building sites, or the head nurse, ward nurse, or whatever it might be in a hospital situation or aged care facility, and the pressure coming down from above. And I've seen it, I've lived through it, and I'm sure you have as well, is
Absolutely.
I don't care how you do it, just get the job done. So there's stress put on someone who then transfers that stress to people below them, excuse me, and down the line it goes.
Oh, 100%. And I think the comment that you made at the start of our conversation was around, like we're still seeing COVID, everyone's still off sick at the moment, we've got this next wave and all that sort of stuff. Remembering, though, that we've still got people that haven't rejoined the workforce because they left the workforce because of whether it's a vaccination or whatever it was, and they're not back into their chosen profession. Or we've got millennials. There's a lot of research at the moment that COVID impacted millennials from a workplace perspective as much as any other demographic in the workforce, because millennials actually left the workforce. The Great Resignation was actually driven in some way by millennials. So these are our younger workers. And the words that they used, Robert, was they're trying to find purpose.
Yeah.
And right, which is cool. Absolutely, and we're all trying to find purpose in our work. Now, would you believe, here's a funny story for you, that around the time that some of that research was coming out that I was talking about it, to people like yourself, my 22-year-old, a millennial, come home and said, Dad, I need to quit my job. I don't have enough purpose in my work. I went, really?
Okay.
Well, sold his house, moved to the capital city. He's going to go and become a naval aviator, would you believe? True story. So,
oh, dear. Loretta, you have family, you have friends. What's the vibe coming back in social conversations about people's workplace? Are they bringing their workplace pressures into that social environment, looking for some sort of answer, help, reason?
At points. G'day, Anton. How are you going?
G'day, Loretta. How are you?
It's lovely to hear from you again. And I'm really interested, Anton, and you're talking about, we need to care. We need to care for those people that are caring for us and that are out there doing that work. And I'm really interested in this. There's probably some long-term things that can be put in place and we can do.
Cool.
But in that short term, and I know it's probably first aid sort of stuff, what would you be suggesting? So if you're someone who, you're in leadership, and you're looking at your crew and you're looking at your team, what sort of psychological first aid should we be putting into place so that we can keep people from burning out? And I know people are very, very close to the edge and some have gone over, but what are some of those first aid things that we could really be putting in place?
Yeah, and let me break it right down for you, Loretta, if I could, not only because of time, nothing else, is that leaders just need to actually take the advice that you and I are talking about now and slow down, calm down, listen to their teams, engage in conversations. The two words that I'll leave you with today, Loretta, is what we call radical candor. Now, those two words come out of Psychological Safety in a book by Kim Scott, radical candor. And it's the way that you have conversations as a leader with your team. Now, I love what you said. You called it so clearly and so honestly and said, hey, sometimes in the short term we can't get more. Like, this is what it is.
Mm.
And for a leader to have that conversation in a caring way and a challenging way to say, hey, how do we do this with the resources that we've got? And it's a leader actually having the conversation you just had with honesty and just say, look, we can't achieve that. And yes, we might have to go out and tell a family member that that, we've triaged and someone has to wait longer on a building site, that, we need to go and have a conversation with the client that the schedule's going to be impacted. So it's about leaders understanding what is going on for their team members, calling it, and actually having a caring and challenging conversation that is direct and say, right, talk me through it. How are you feeling? How are you coping? There's a question. How are you coping, at the moment? And it's not, are you good or are you okay? Because they're very closed questions. Tell me, how are you coping with what's going on at the moment? Now, you imagine having that conversation in the middle of an ER while things are going crazy and while things are hectic. I'm actually speaking at the Emergency Nurses Conference later in the year, which is why this is so relevant to me at the moment, as I'm putting some of that material together and how leaders can have some of these conversations, even in, let's say, in inverted commas, the heat of the battle, for example. So, it's about leaders connecting. And if you'd read that book, Radical Candor, what Kim Scott talks about is leaders having a connection with their team members, so that even in the heat of battle, they can have real conversations, and those conversations might be far, short, honest conversations where leaders get a feel for how their team are coping, and not then overstressing them or over-pressuring them to do more than they actually physically can. So it's about leadership understanding, and leadership taking this advice to say, hey, breathe, slow down. You've only got as many resources as you've got on today's shift or for the next week or whatever it is.
Anton, is good leadership about necessarily stepping up to do the extra to show your team, for example, let's say in an aged care facility, the leader who spends the day in the office doing administrational thing gets out on the floor, gets in the kitchen, does dishes, to show that they care and they're filling the gap. Mm-hmm. Is that always a good thing, or is it a bit horses for courses sometimes?
Mate, I'm going to say it's horses for courses, Robert, because there are times when leaders can, and there's other times when they probably need to be in doing the other stuff, let's say, because some of that other stuff is supporting a team to get it done, like, maybe ringing around to get more resources, for example. My lovely wife's a school teacher, and as one of the assistant principals, their job is to, at the moment, just keep getting supply staff, because in the teaching environment, always understaffed at the moment because, teachers are going down with COVID. So there's, in that case, that leader isn't really, oh, well, sometimes actually she does. Sometimes she goes and does a class if they need to. So, yeah, there are times, Robert, when leaders can step in and take control and actually participate and support. And what I hear from leaders that do that, they'll say, I'll never ask a team member to do something that I won't do myself. And I love that attitude, though I just love it at the right time when there's time and a place for that.
And the other thing that's important, it means that you have to then do your other stuff at a later point, which is okay. But then the next level of leadership sitting above that, and I'm using an example in my mind of a known example today of a friend of mine who is doing stuff outside of their normal job, and they will close the gap on their responsibilities between 5 and 7 tonight before they go home, because they've done it weeks and weeks. But the level above, do they come in and say, we really appreciate what you're doing, you will be rewarded extra? A lot of that I just see as, oh, well, that's part of your job, your responsibility. Even though you're paid for 38 hours, you just have to get it done, so get it done. That's where that other leadership level, at a level above, needs to kick in and just show a bit of that empathy, compassion and understanding.
We're talking about the big topics today, mate. Here's the thing. There's two things about that, and I love that recognition and reward piece, is that behaviour that is rewarded is repeated. Behaviour that's rewarded is repeated. Recognition and reward, to me, is the most underutilised skill in leadership.
Yeah, I agree.
Ever. Because it's just, let's imagine two lines, right? The top line is expectation, so what we expect of our team, and the bottom line is acceptation, so what we accept, so the lowest sort of standard. And most of our team members are in between what we accept and what we expect, right? Now, if team members fall below what's expected and performance suffers, we're very, very quick to have those conversations.
Oh, yeah.
Performance management. What about when we exceed expectations? And what about all those nurses or aged care workers who are going above and beyond, or leaders that are going above and beyond and working outside of hours? We forget to recognise and reward that.
Yeah, and then it becomes there's a new expectation. Well, you did it last week. Why aren't you doing it this week? Or why are you whinging about it this week?
Yeah.
And I've certainly seen live cases of that. And this is where the conversation we've had often about good and bad leadership, what sort of environment you want to create, what sort of place you want your workers to go to. So they either go to work dreading being there, in fear of upsetting the boss or in fear of failure, as opposed to going there with a smile and a spring in their step and saying, this is my job, I love it, I want to give. That's the difference about good leadership.
Oh, 100% well said, Robert. And that's the thing about psychological safety, where if we can create that environment where, and in psych safety they talk about people bringing their whole selves to work and really showing up because they want to be there, not because they have to be there, if that makes sense. And then when they do show up, there's these 4 levels of psychological safety by Timothy Clark. There's inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, and challenger safety. So how do we include people? How do we bring them into our team? Have we got an environment of learners and developing? So do we train our team members so that they're always growing? Because that's a key human need, to grow. And then what about contributor safety? Can people actually be their best selves without, worried about what other people think in their team? Oh, they're just, going to try and look good for the boss. No, they're contributing. They're a great team member. And then the final element of psychological safety is challenger safety. Is it okay for you and I to come to work, Robert, and say to our leaders, hey, I think I've got an innovative idea. I think I can be creative with this. I think there's a smarter, better, faster way that we can do this. And the leader said, great, appreciate, great idea. Instead of, no, that won't.
Yeah.
Not all ideas will fly, but it's how you tell your team member that idea is not a good one, that actually encourages them to say something next time.
Correct, and I think that's an important thing in an environment where the whole workplace, the whole environment, and a gentleman who is a leader of people has just walked into the studio in a sporting field, which we'll talk about later, but having an environment where people are comfortable and confident to come up and share their ideas and thoughts, knowing that it's going to be treated respectfully, as opposed to put down and your job's over there, go and do that. So that's not creating that friendly, solid team environment.
That's right, and it's we say these 3 words. So in the literature they use another 3, but we use without ridicule, without resentment, and without rejection. And people that feel one of those 3 means that the leader conversation hasn't been done properly, hasn't been done directly and in a caring way. So now you're absolutely right. How we talk to our team members, like, it can have a lasting impact, Robert. Like, leadership conversations are so important. And you and I might have discussed this, but there'll be some of your listeners today that if I said to them, think back to a time when a leader hurt your heart or really impacted on you, a conversation that you can remember that really hurt you because they didn't take the care of the time to do that conversation properly. Some of your listeners will have conversations like that, Robert, that they can remember from 20 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's how important these leadership conversations are, mate. And, it sort of comes back to what Loretta said before. It's how leaders handle these tough situations that will determine how their team members show up day after day. Do they want to work for this leader, or do they just want to get through the day, get through the shift just so they can survive? Or are they thrive, or are they going to survive?
So the important lesson, I suppose, is for people to be patient, understanding, caring, particularly in a leadership situation. And I suppose everybody in those care environments at the moment are aware that they need to go a little bit above and beyond. And it's just a subtle difference in that thought process in your mind. Am I going to be appreciated for doing this because I know it needs to be done, or is it going to be taken for granted? That's a lesson. And I hope for those of you listening this morning that do go into that workplace, that you work in the former environment and you are appreciated, and it makes it easier to do a little bit more. Good lessons again, mate. Really appreciate your time. Always a good chat. We'll look forward to chatting to you in a month or so, and hopefully a better environment that we'll be in then.
That's right. And thank you to you and Loretta for the great conversation, the great questions, and a big shout out to your listeners who always support us. Without listeners, you and I don't really get to do this. So big shout out to them too.
Good on you, mate. All the very best.
Thanks, Anton.
Thanks, Loretta.
Anton Guinea, he is our workplace safety leadership sort of expert and a very busy man in this